Hello and welcome back to another really fascinating live session here, going across three platforms. And today I'm talking to somebody who's extremely fascinating. He describes himself as a writer about ideas or writer of ideas, and he's a creator of some amazing brands, including Bailey's, Smirnoff Black, Aqua Libra, Le Pied d'Or, Purdy's, the list goes on. But we connected and a couple of days ago, and it was just a fascinating conversation. So welcome, David Gluckman. It's great to meet you. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Simon, even though it's a Monday morning.
I know. But what better time to shake everybody up and talk about ideas? And you describe yourself as a writer about ideas, or a writer of ideas. And, you know, you've got an amazing book, and it's going to be a small swear word from Monday morning, but that shit will never sell. Just fascinating. And, you know, we had a great conversation about the importance of clarified thinking and keeping committees out of business and all this sort of stuff. But let's talk about, you talk about creating successful brands is not a democracy. What do you mean by that?
Well, I go back into the idea business to 1969, I think, and over the course of the last 50 plus years, I've worked on maybe 1,000 projects. Now, a lot of them were unsuccessful, but quite a few have been successful. And I think the formula that emerged for me was that the way to make ideas succeed is to have very few people involved in their creation. And to me, the optimum number is two. It's a client who commissions the idea and a supplier provider like me who comes up with the idea. Although I think our roles are very much interchangeable. But as soon as you throw ideas open to wider groups of people, you start breaking them down, you start diluting them. Everybody, there are loads of intelligent people out there, and if you ask an intelligent person to comment on something, they feel obligated to come up with a suggestion. And as these additional suggestions come in, so ideas get diluted. I mean, the guy who said that a camel is a horse designed by a committee was very true. So I think it's not a democracy. It has to be a few people, and you have to take very strong decisions, and you have to walk away sometimes from research results that say you're wrong and do it. I mean, most good ideas, I think, are driven by supply, not by demand. I think the whole success of Apple is because he imposed superior thinking on an unsuspecting world. People weren't crying out for iPads and iPods and everything else.
No, you're right. You're right. And you're right in terms of, I used to be legal counsel for an American tech company, and the CEO there at the time had this statement, and it was democratic decision-making, dictatorial execution. So he would get input, but when a decision had to be made, he would make it. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that, and I've seen it in my own professional career within large businesses, and also, you know, as a co-investor in small companies and collaborators in terms of coaching and consulting. The more people you get on board, the more you have to kind of tiptoe around each other, and it really does dilute. And so that brings us then onto the second area, which is the whole area of marketing. And personally, I've had a love-hate relationship with marketing departments all my career, and there are some amazing people who work in marketing and great organizations. But you say that you've never had success which started in a marketing department. Maybe share a little bit more about that.
I think that's true. I mean, looking over everything I've done, the best clients, the best champions of brands were always people very high up in the organization. And their interest wasn't how, it was when. In other words, the CEO of a company doesn't want to know what methodology you use to arrive at a conclusion. He simply wants to know when you're going to deliver that conclusion. And I think marketing people are fantastic, and every single brand that I've developed that's been successful has been made successful by marketing people who've developed it from nothing into an entity on the market. But Marketing people are no good at creating brands because they ask too many questions. There are too many openings for options and alternatives. And I can imagine going back to something like Bailey's, they would have said, is there a market for a product like this? The answer was no, there isn't a market for it because it didn't exist. Then why do you choose the name Bailey's? It's not a typically Irish name. Yeah. And the package doesn't look, so what happens here is that you open things out into a whole lot of options which you test, and that takes time, and above everything it costs an incredible amount of money. The amount of money people spend before a brand even gets onto the drawing board is ludicrous, I think.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the marketing route, I think the best people to buy ideas are the people who have the ability to fail, who can accept that failure happens. I mean, it's just part of business life. It's part of all life, really. Absolutely. But marketing people do everything that they can to find methodology to underwrite success, and there's no such thing.
Absolutely. And, I'm kind of living proof of that. I was involved in a couple of startups in Australia. I co-founded a watch company over there, which I mentioned to you. And it's still a very raw nerve because, I'm no longer involved. And but that was a great example of two people one person coming up with the name, and then we commercialized it together. And we didn't have any marketing people. And then marketing people got involved, and it got very confused and muddled, and it became very difficult. And so, I really get that. And then the whole area of market research. I mean, I've got a personal love-hate relationship, probably more on the hate side with market research, because I think, you can scare off creativity and innovation. Innovation is about coming up with ideas and having a go, and market research, from my experience, is about almost kind of proving that it's not feasible. What do you mean when you say market research is hugely overvalued?
Well, I think a lot of people use it as a crutch upon which to build success or failure. And I remember a case back in the 70s of a brand called Guinness Light in Ireland. And I didn't create it, but I picked up on it and was invited by Guinness to come and consult. Now, they'd spent about £1 million on market research, proving incontrovertibly that 18 to 24-year-old Irish men were desperate for a product called Guinness Light. So they launched it with a huge brouhaha all over the media. They put it into every pub in Ireland, and it was a monumental disaster. And the reason for that was that they had not interviewed 40-year-old Irish men who were diehard Guinness drinkers. And I remember a respondent in a focus group saying to me, you know what, I walked into this pub in Galway and it was festooned with Guinness Light material. And I thought I'd order a pint, and it even came in a Guinness Light glass. And I ordered it and I put it to my lips, and an elderly friend of mine tapped me on the back and said, drinking ladies Guinness, are we? And the research had all said this was a copper-bottom success, that there's no way it would fail. And I find it strange also that, people would spend $100,000 designing a new package and then go out and ask a whole lot of people who know absolutely nothing about pack design which one they like best. Because I think what consumers do is there's a default to liking stuff that they know. They don't know about stuff that's in the future. They can't pronounce the future. We did focus groups often on all the stuff that I worked on, but I did them myself because I wanted to press the flesh of the consumers. It's not rocket science. Any intelligent person can learn how to run a focus group in an afternoon. And I did them myself because one day my client said, look, you do it. It's a lot cheaper, which it was, and a lot better. But we never did more than 4 focus groups on anything, because after one, you get about 90% of what you're looking for. And thereafter, the returns diminish.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah,
Overrated.
you mentioned also, I mean, when we chatted, I mean, Virgin Cola, I remember that was launched with a massive brouhaha. I think it was back in the 90s, I can't remember. And and that's an example, but there's many other examples. But if you're going to launch a competitor to something like Coca-Cola or Pepsi Cola, you're going to have bottomless pit of resources, or you're going to have some serious strategic serendipity luck to break in. So surely if you're going to market something like that, you're going to do that slightly tongue in cheek. And I don't think they did. I think they went in really believing or suggesting that they were going to replace Coca-Cola. And do you agree it's the strength of this stuff is in the messaging as much as it's in the intent as much as the invention?
Well, it is. I mean, I worked on a thing called Virgin Lager, which I think, fortunately for everybody, never happened. But it happened after the launch of Virgin Cola and Virgin Vodka, both of which were kind of nuzzling up against brands like Coke and Smirnoff. And this is quite interesting because I think Branson felt that the Virgin name would carry all and would enable him to compete successfully. And it didn't work out like that. When I said to him in the lager, I think you need a product that's differentiated, he said, no, as long as it's as good as Budweiser, the Virgin name will carry it, which wasn't true. So my theory came out of that, which was if you're competing with a mega brand, aim for the ankles, not for the heart.
Exactly.
I wrote a piece called Sour Cola on LinkedIn, if anyone's interested in finding it. And Sour Cola says, what happens if you come up with something which 3% of Coke drinkers absolutely adore, but the other 97% hate? You still have a market that's worth about $1 billion.
Exactly.
But what person is going to accept an idea where 97% of people hate it? It's a very tough question. And I think it all comes back to market research as an excuse for taking decisions about the business that you're supposed to know about.
Yeah. No, that's profound. And you focus on the buyer there, and you say that organizations should place more emphasis on identifying people who are good at buying ideas. Personally, I think that is genius advice, right? And yet most companies don't focus on this. What do you mean by companies need to focus more on people who are good at buying ideas?
Well, I met maybe a couple of hundred people through my career, and probably half a dozen saw an idea immediately and bought it because they had a very good understanding of what the problem was. And I think these are skills that I don't think people look at enough. I think if I were an academic, I'd be looking to devise a method of identifying people who are good at buying ideas. You can say, I remember a story, a brand called Sheridan's.
Yeah.
Well, I went to Dublin to have a meeting about developing a new coffee cream liqueur. And I was going to get the brief, and I stopped in the bar at Dublin Airport and saw them pulling a pint of Guinness, and it looked terrific. And suddenly an idea formed in my head. The meeting was at the hotel right on Dublin Airport. And I went along, and before I had a chance to brief, I said to the client, would you mind if I order a pint of Guinness? 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, sorry, what do you mean? Anyway, he agreed. And I ordered the pint of Guinness, and I held it up, and I said, this is not a pint of Guinness, it's a cup of tea. How would you like to drink the dark stuff, the coffee, through the cream at the top? And he said, how do you do that? And I thought of something. I remembered when I was a kid, my father had a bottle at home, which was divided into two compartments and with two different corks. And you took one off and poured one liqueur, and you took another one off and had another one.
Yeah.
So I said, I can imagine a bottle which is 3/4 one side and 1/4 the other. The quarter size would be the white stuff, and the 3/4 would be the dark stuff. And the dark stuff would have a big hole in it, and Other side would have a small hole in it. And when you poured them, the dark stuff would cascade into the glass. The white stuff would trickle out slowly and would form on the top. So it would look like a miniature Irish coffee or a miniature pint of Guinness. And to my the pitch took about as long as it's taking now, and all I had as a prop was a pint of Guinness. And the guy bought the idea on the spot, and I thought that was amazing. I'd never met him before, so it wasn't as if we'd had any kind of history together. And I was going there to be told what to do, not to. And it was a fantastic. And the brand became Sheridan's. And although it's not set the world on fire, it's still around and it's still turning over about $90 million a year. And people like that, there aren't many people I met who were like that, who could say, yes, let's do that.
Yeah, no way. And when you, in my experience as well, when you meet them, you have to have this a self and situational awareness radar about you. If you're a buyer, you have to have some sort of sense of, you have to have self and situational awareness, and also have a bit of an ability to take chances, but calculated, non-deluded chances. And I think that comes from, I don't know whether it's experience, whether it's innate, but there's something there, and I think a lot of this is about, leadership, and leadership is about managing risk. And you talk about the most successful champions of new ideas are the people at the top of organizations. What do you mean that in the context of getting ideas out there?
I think, to me, I'm writing another book, and it's really it's about how big companies can operate like small agile startups, because that's exactly what we did for my 36 years working for IDV / Diageo. We had a tiny team, and it was me on the one side representing the outside consultant, and an R&D expert who had a lot of experience and interest outside his particular field. And basically, it was two people who did all the work, and we could produce quite a lot in a very short time. And then we could tap into the facilities that the organization had to offer. I think they've changed a lot now. I think they've got massive innovation hubs all over the world. We didn't do that. We were much smaller than that, and I think more effective for that purpose. But you need one board director to provide the air cover that's essential for this to happen. And then you did think we put brands on the market at a very low price, tested them in the market, changed them if we had to, and that's how and then passed them on to companies who then made them work.
Well, that's powerful. And that brings us on then to my last question, which is, you talk about the most significant lesson you've learned is the need to deliver a single idea in response to a brief. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, just going back to when my original career was in advertising, and I remember there was an agency in London called Collett Dickinson Pierce, who produced some of the best advertising in the world in the 1960s and the 1970s. Absolutely incredible campaigns. And I worked in a more conservative agency, and we looked across at CDP and discovered that they only ever produced a single response to a brief, never more than one. And if they couldn't sell that idea, they would go away and do another one. And once I got into product development and started to become, I suppose, a creative person, someone whose responsibility was to deliver ideas, I suddenly realized that if you had more than one idea, you didn't have any. A client would say to me, "What do you mean, why two ideas? You mean you haven't solved the problem?" And they were absolutely right. I think if you are going to be true to the business of creating ideas, you can only have one solution. It's not necessarily the best thing you could ever do, but there's no way of determining that. I mean, when we took Bailey's, there was no plan B. We took this kind of crazy, milky drink that had never happened before to a bunch of people we never met before. And they bought everything except one word. They changed it. It was originally called Bailey's chocolate cream liqueur. They took the word chocolate off, and which is great, because I think once you start messing with things like that, it becomes yours.
Yeah.
And brands, it's a sad thing with brand development, but once you create the brand, you're no longer involved. You pass it on to the client, and it goes away. I haven't had anything to do with Bailey's since 1974.
Yeah.
I've
experienced that with some brands I've been involved with, and it never leaves you, does it? It's always part of your psyche. It's sort of a slice up there that's part of your psyche. So in terms of ideas, maybe just quickly just talk about your existing book, This Shit Will Never Happen, and you say you're working on a new book as well. Can you talk about, maybe start with the new book? What are you working on now?
Well, the new book is tentatively called Corporate Cajones, which is the Spanish word for private parts. But since I'd got a rude word into my first book, I figured another one would apply. And what it says, its proposition is how large corporations can operate like small, agile startups, because we did it. And that's true. That's the way we operated. IDV, even at the beginning, was a global company. It wasn't huge. It's only become huge since it's become Diageo and merged with Guinness UD and taken over Seagram's and everything else. But we always operated like a small company. And I think if I started all over again, I would continue to do that.
We've already had the book. Somebody said, nice name for the book. So you've already been validated.
Oh, thank you. That's all you need. Here's the original book.
Very clever. Very clever.
Will never sell. Have a look at www.thatshitwillneversell.com, where you can preview it. And if you live in England, you can get it for 30% off.
Wow.
I've become a book salesman.
What an offer. Yeah, absolutely. So how do people find out more about you and your work, and maybe connect with you if they want to talk to you about more publishing ideas or speaking, or et cetera, et cetera?
Well, www.thatshitwillneversell.com is the website for my book. My email address is david@thatshitwillneversell.com. It's called Living the Brand. If anyone buys my book, I'm always very happy to talk to them. In fact, I've talked to a load of young startups, and I'm always happy to provide advice to any readers. And I'm trying to keep my hand in and develop new brands at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I'm sure there's people over here in Ireland, I know, and I know there's somebody, in the UK who's very keen to chat. So it's been wonderful talking to you, David. And I know we're going to keep in touch. We're going to have more conversations about other stuff. And thanks so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Likewise. Okay, bye-bye.
Great way to start the week. Bye now.